Hey, hey, mamas. Welcome back to Conquering Chaos, a mom's guide to self-care and sanity. I'm your host, Sydney Crow, and today we have Crystal Nelson from Atlanta, Georgia. Crystal is a psychiatrist. She has been practicing for 17 years. She is a mom of three and is a blended family. She's gone through loss and was a widow from her first marriage. She's now raising a blended family, and she loves to talk about all things in terms of mental wellness, balance for motherhood. She also has a book called The Better Blueprint for to Mental Health. So we're going to touch on that. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sydney, for having me on your show.
Thank you for being here. I'm super excited to dive into this. Mental wellness and mental health, especially for mothers, is something I'm extremely passionate about. So why don't you just tell the listeners who you are and what you're all about?
So, my name is Dr. Crystal Nelson. I'm a psychiatrist, like Sydney said, in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been a psychiatrist for almost 17 years. Doesn't seem like that long, but it has been. I have three kids. So, I have two biological children and one bonus son. As Sydney stated, I was married and my first spouse passed away from cancer. So, I became a single mom unexpectedly. Well, I would say sooner than I would have liked. And so I became a single mom and then I remarried and then got a bonus son and then had another child. And so in that whole process of all of the changes, I've balanced being a mom, also starting my own company, going out on my own, and all of the chaos and craziness that comes with trying to do the world's most important things all at one time. So,
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
Being a mother, especially when you're raising multiple kids, is a tough enough balancing act on its own, let alone, starting your own practice and building that up for the last 17 years, which is incredible. So, how do you manage it all? What are your go-to tips and tricks for moms out there that are, starting their own business and or raising kids? From a psychiatrist perspective and from your personal experience, what do you feel like is the most important things that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, one of my mentors early on, I had my daughter in the middle of medical school. And so I was set to go forward to become an OBGYN. That was my dream. I was going to be an OBGYN. And one of my mentors at the time, she said to me, well, if you're not going to be comfortable with, having a nanny and some resources, that you're not going to really be able to pull this off. And so I had to really think about that. And one of the pieces of advice that she gave me, she says, you can have it all. You can do everything, all these things that you want to do, but not at the same time. And
Mm,
I've shared that with so many women over the years because I tell everybody there are some days I'm an amazing doctor, fantastic, wonderful. And I'm not the greatest mom that day or the greatest wife that day
yep.
because it required all of my time. And then there are days like yesterday when I literally built a fort with my kids and we're in the fort and me, my kids, the dog, we're having a great time. But I was not a doctor yesterday. I was
Yes.
not really, spending time being a wife that much during that time. So just being in the box and staying in the box and being okay with that as you go through instead of I find that women want to be 1000% on everything at all times at the same time. And it brings more distress than we can manage versus
Absolutely.
okay, right now I'm being a great mom and the rest has to wait.
Oh, I love that advice so much. And it's, hitting home. I have a very, very busy month ahead of me and probably a little busier than I'm used to. And that just really hit home today. So there was a reason we got connected and we're doing this interview today because it was a very gentle reminder that I needed. And I'm sure there's other moms out there that need that today too. So when you're looking at that and you're having to balance, right? It comes down to a lot of scheduling, I'm sure. Do you have specific time management tips that you can share with the listeners that work well for you? Or is it just this is the box I'm in this moment, and I'm not going to let anything else distract me from that?
Well, definitely scheduling things. Hats off to any mom or anybody doing anything major that doesn't have a schedule. I mean, you have to have everything scheduled, in my opinion, to pull all of it off. But you also have to schedule the fun stuff. I
Mm,
find that, people will be really great at scheduling their business stuff But you have to schedule play. Like when I'll use another example, my daughter, when I was in med school on Thursday nights, it was mommy daughter date night.
Mm.
And she knew that it was mommy daughter date night because I literally at times would be working, 80 hours, 110 hours. And she would have so much she wanted to tell me every single day. And I would say, unless it's an emergency, can we save it for mommy daughter date night? And on mommy daughter date night, I mean, she'd unload, she would share,
Wow.
she would share everything, that she wanted to talk about throughout the week. But I put it on my schedule.
Mm.
So and so when I am in that box, just like when I'm talking to my patients, if I'm in the room with that patient, that's all that's happening.
Yep.
So they feel like they're my only patient. I'm their doc. They're getting my undivided attention. So same with my spouse, same with my kids, making sure that I put them on my schedule because otherwise, I mean, for most of us, work could take up all of it.
You really could.
I mean, it
All
really,
day, every
or
day.
kids could take up all of it, and we
Yeah.
wouldn't have time for work or our spouse or significant others. So it's really being scheduled. And then I would say being flexible enough when the schedule doesn't go quite how we plan. A sick kid pops up. I mean, your schedule kind of goes out the window.
Yeah.
So, being flexible, but planning for the most part, all those things we want to accomplish.
I love that. It's very much. So when you're looking at your practice and, as a doctor in mental wellness,
Yeah.
what would you say are the key things that you're seeing, especially in today, because the world is a little bit different after the last 3 years?
Right.
So, what are you seeing that you would say is the most important for either new moms or seasoned moms to really help make their mental wellness a priority for themselves?
So, what I am seeing a lot of post-pandemic, even before, but I think the pandemic just put some gas on the fire is anxiety. The
Mm,
amount of anxiety that women are presenting to me with is just, I don't even know if there's a word to describe the amount of anxiety and the amount of women that are dealing with this. And I think it comes back to what we're talking about. They have so many things on their plate. There's so many more decisions and so many more options that we have in this society than ever before. And
yeah.
so decisions bring about fatigue and anxiety.
Mm,
We don't have an unlimited supply of wanting to make decisions every single day. I mean, some mothers, we're making 10,000 decisions before 12 noon,
mm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
And that
then
weighs heavy.
right, that gets to be too much. So I think one of the ways to kind of cut down on that is to decrease the amount of decisions. Some of the things that we're stressing about or that are adding to that decision fatigue are unnecessary.
Mm,
So, I try to focus in on what are your top three? What are your top three things that you want to accomplish today? When I ask women, moms, what do you want to accomplish today? The list is unrealistic. I mean,
okay.
it is a ridiculous amount of things that is almost humanly impossible. But the problem with that is at the end of the day, if that was your list in the morning and at the end of the day you don't accomplish that, you're stressed, you're beating yourself up, you're having anxiety about the next day because now you have even more to come up with when it wasn't realistic from the start.
Yeah.
So just narrowing down those things that are the priority so you can feel accomplished. So you can feel like, okay, I'm moving forward. I'm making progress. I'm happy. So
Yeah.
that is my tip for ladies. Take some of these things off of this to-do list. It's not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had somebody that said it was the 3 Ds: delegate, delete, or defer.
I like that. I like that. I love that because delegate is a big one that I've had to learn. My goodness, that was a hard one for me
Yeah.
because I felt like I had to be the person to do it all. And if I wasn't, then it wasn't going to be done right. That's a control issue, which also brings about anxiety. And there's so much that you don't have to do. You can easily delegate. And some of it that whoever you may be delegating it to would enjoy. Some of these
Yeah.
things that we are doing, we don't enjoy doing them. And so we need
Absolutely.
to pass the buck to someone who that's their thing and
Yep,
they're in their happy space doing that for me or for you.
for sure.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, for me, one of the things that I had to delegate was my kids' laundry. I still help them start the wash machine, maybe help them put it in the dryer, but for the most part, they have to bring it down, they have to get it started, they have to fold their own clothes.
Right.
But then I would open up their dressers and it would just be mayhem. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that was a hard one because, you want their clothes to look nice. And like for me, it was like presentable. And I was like, I just have to let this go.
Oh,
And
yeah, exactly.
it's their clothes, and if they like, I've showed them a few times how to fold their shirts, and if they can't get it, they will eventually. This isn't a like hill I need to go and die on. And yeah, I mean, it was such a huge release, right? It took me a little
Yeah.
while, but it definitely makes such a huge difference in my week because it's one less thing that I have to worry about.
Yeah, and that's so true. What you said is just to let some of it go. Because
Mhm.
again, some of those things, they just in the end won't matter that much. I
Yeah.
remember my son, my bonus son, I mean, he's 23 now, and worrying about if the room was clean, worrying about if the room was clean. And then I remember when he moved out. When he moved out, the room was clean. And
Mm.
I thought, oh, rooms that people don't live in are clean.
Yeah.
So I was stressing about him keeping this room clean. And at the end of the day, how he keeps his room in his home or how he keeps his home is still going to be his business. It is
Yeah.
not going to affect me in the long run. And we might not ever match up on how we like things to be neat and tidy. And
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. So, like you said, if the drawer is mayhem, at the end of the day, who cares? The clothes are clean.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there is that like age-old saying, whereas if it's not going to matter in 5 minutes, is it really going to matter in 5 years?
Right, right. And
So,
that's a lot of, I think that's a lot of stress. Again, in talking to ladies, I hear so much stress about, I mean, every little detail of their kids' lives. They're stressed about, their child is, 10, and they're stressed about if the activities that their 10-year-old are doing that is going to get them into college.
mm,
Like they're 10,
yeah.
you
But I
know,
think
that,
that's part of society,
yes,
right? I feel like, especially now with everything at our fingertips, with social media, there's this huge comparison game. And even if we don't want to play it, our mind still brings us there, right? And so it
absolutely.
is this like give and take of like learning how to go with the ebbs and flows that life is giving you, focus on the things that are really truly important right now, but also knowing that there are things that we do need to set them up for in the future. But is that really the priority today?
Right, right. And coming back to that question you just said, is it the priority today? And it's not, and there is a more important thing, then we need to shift our attention to that. And you're right, it is, we are in a society, especially with social media, where even if you don't want to compare, I mean, you're seeing what everybody and their neighbor is doing, what they're eating, what their kids have on, all of those details. So that's another thing I often will suggest to people is to disconnect from that.
Okay.
Have regular disconnect time from social media for you and for your kids,
Yeah.
because it can really, really zap your own creativity, your own desires, because some of that, again, it's much easier for me to, if I pull back from some of the comparison, for me to say, who cares if my kids' drawers are mayhem? But if I'm on social media and I see my neighbor's children, they look perfect, their clothes are perfect, her house looks so clean, then that's going to likely cause me to feel bad when
Yeah.
versus she might have just taken the picture and she's crying in the bathroom later. Like,
Well, and
that's reality.
that
That's more
is.
reality.
Well, and you'll see like these, like, I like these comparison. There's some social media accounts now where they're like, this is the Instagram picture and the kitchen is spotless, right? They're there, their hair is done, they look great in their kitchen. And then they do the behind the scenes, and the rest of
Yeah.
the house is just in utter disarray. And you're
That's
like, this is reality.
Yeah, this was years back. I had two patients I was seeing, and they were neighbors, and they didn't know that they were both seeing me. And
Okay.
both of them would come in basically feeling bad about the other one
Oh,
because they
goodness.
thought that the other one, had it all together. They would talk about how in church, this one looks so great. And then I can't get my daughter to be motivated, not knowing that they're competing with each other in this way. And both of them are falling apart seeing a psychiatrist. And I just thought, man, you guys could commiserate with each other, support one another, and,
Totally.
not have this anxiety instead of competing with one another about an unrealistic picture of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had a therapist one time tell me that unsaid expectations will unravel everything.
Yeah.
And so it was one thing that like now my husband and I will really like dive in and communicate, because once you start communicating those expectations, or once you start having those like real conversations with your neighbor and just being like, man, like you got it all together today. Like how did you manage that?
Yeah.
And she'll be like, oh, well, you had it all together yesterday, right? Like it's and then you just can kind of sit down and have like a real laugh about it, because really you're having this, they were having this unsaid expectation of one another. That's yeah,
Nobody has it all together. I mean, zero
nobody.
people have it all together. It does not matter who you're following. Who do you think? Not me, not you. I mean,
Yep.
we don't. Some days, that house might be running like a well-oiled machine, and you're like, check, 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 got it all done. And some days, nothing is running
Yep.
like a well-oiled machine. It's a day where you're like, let me get through the next couple hours, and I'm going to take a nap and try to start this all over again
Yeah. Can we
because
hit the
it's just
reset
chaotic.
button?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's just
Yeah.
chaotic some days. But I mean, that's life. We're all human beings in this human experience. There's no magical way in or out.
I love that. Straight from the mouth of a psychiatrist for
Yeah,
17 years, you guys. This is nobody has it all together, and we all are going to have days with that superhero cape and days where we are crumbling behind the front door.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that is again, it's always shocking. I was telling a story. I was telling this story actually on Instagram, I think. I was on Instagram or Facebook, I don't remember. And I was saying how I saw a patient of mine in the library. And I said, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And she like froze and she didn't even know what to say. And she says, "Oh, this is so strange. It's like you're a real person." And I thought, yeah, I don't live behind my desk at my office. Yes, I'm a real person, but it made me think, and I posted that video to say the same thing I'm saying. We're all having a human experience. It doesn't matter what position you may view someone in, whether they're an influencer, celebrity, your physician. I mean, we're all having the same human experiences. My kids get on my nerves just like yours. My
Yeah.
spouse bothers me just like yours. I have disagreements with, it's the same. I might have more tools to
Yeah.
get through those things, those moments faster, but that's it. That is absolutely it. There's nothing else that makes me separate.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, why
Yeah.
don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about your book?
Yeah, so a better blueprint to mental health. It's just a workbook. So I created this guidebook. In my practice, we do what we call interventional psychiatry, where we do a treatment that uses magnets for the treatment of depression, where people have failed multiple medications and they're looking for something else other than medications. So the patients are with us for about 6 weeks. And so one of the questions that they would ask is, well, what do I do every day? They wanted something to use every single day to kind of give them something really practical to do while they were doing treatment. So I created it. So it is just a daily prompt. So it will talk about some daily, basically a coping skill, give them some context around it. And then at night, there are three other prompts to have them focus on three things. So like I said, my
Mm.
top three things. So there's a morning and their night, morning and a night. And it was 40 days and 40 nights. And when I kind of thought about that, I thought, okay, wow. So they're with us almost 40 days, 40 nights, and they're kind of in the wilderness. They're lost and confused. And so it gave them something in the morning and in the evening for them to do. And I have them go through it and then kind of land upon a handful of things. If they come out in those 40 days, 40 nights with a handful of things that really work, that's your toolbox. Those are your coping skills because
Mm.
every coping skill doesn't work for every person.
Yep.
Some people deep breathing is not going to work. For
Yeah.
some people, it might be they have to sprint, you know?
Okay.
So they come up with their set of coping skills and then they continue to hopefully build upon that after they finish the treatment and they're going back to their normal life.
I love that. And I really like that you were able to, highlight that not everything works for every single person.
Yeah,
I have been saying this for so long. Like, I feel like a lot of times people want you to fit into the mold, right? Like, there's like a shoebox or something where they're just like, this is how it is. And it
right.
doesn't work for everybody. And so I really appreciate your take on that and the way that you've been able to design this workbook so that people are able to figure out what works best for them. I think that's so helpful to work through.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that again adds to that level of stress that people
Mhm.
experience because we're trying to have everybody fit in these boxes and we just don't. I mean, even in diagnoses, yes, we have general boxes to diagnose a patient, but everybody who is my client knows I hate labels. I hate the
Mm.
diagnoses because they're just not creative enough to describe a human being.
Mm.
I'd rather we say, oh, this is Sydney. And Sydney has these symptoms she's dealing with, she wants to improve. That's it. So we're figuring out how to improve those symptoms that Sydney doesn't like so she can manage her superpower. That's it.
I love that.
Instead of, I will get so frustrated if patients says, I am depressed. I am bipolar. And they come in with their set
Mm.
plan. I've got to be on meds or I've got to have this and I've got to have that. Oh, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
We have to figure out what works for you. And I think when people approach it from that standpoint, you'll find your solution. You will always find a solution if you're open to finding what works for you. So that may mean some trial and error, but
Yeah.
okay, there's not another you.
Yeah.
So it's figuring out, and that's why it's a blueprint. That's why the name of my practice is Blueprint,
Hmm.
because the blueprint is something that is very, very unique. And so we're trying to design and learn your blueprint. And I don't know what that is. And even you might not know what that is. So we're trying to figure that out and write the right blueprint. So we're getting the right foundation, the right outcome, the whole thing.
I just have to say that your take on your practice is such a breath of fresh air, especially in the mental wellness space, because
Yeah,
yeah, I mean it everybody deserves to find out what works best for them. And like you said, I mean, sometimes that is going to be a little bit of like testing things out. But at the end of the day, if you get that custom blueprint that's going to be specific to what you need and how you can improve the areas that you need to improve or are hoping to improve, then who cares if it takes, right? I mean, I think that's
right.
just the way that it's going to go.
And you're not
Yeah,
on
that's
a
it's
time crunch in that way. So you're not thinking about it as a time crunch because this whole thing is your life. It's your journey. There's no
mhm.
rush. I mean, none of us are trying to rush. If you get to the end, it's pretty much that's the end.
Yeah.
So you're on this journey to figure out yourself and what works for you. So that is going to be some trial and error. We try to reduce that as much as possible with some of the tools we use in our clinic and so on and so forth. But just trying to move people away from those labels that make them feel bad, these
Mm.
ideas that this is the way that it goes and mental health. And mental health's gotten a bad rep. I mean, it's gotten a bad rep. People felt like
Mhm.
guinea pigs and it was just about let me throw a med at you. And that is not always the answer, nor is always the answer just, sometimes therapeutic things like talking it out alone. That doesn't work for everybody. Some
Okay.
people are
Yeah.
not going to get better with just talk. They're
Yeah.
going to do some other things.
100%. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it is such a breath of fresh air to hear you say that that's how you run your practice. So we will make sure that we have the link for your blueprint book under here so you guys will be able to find Crystal. Crystal, before we sign off, is there one last piece of advice that you'd love for the moms to know out there?
Let's see. Just I think kind of reiterating what I said. Moms, make sure you're prioritizing things in the right order again. And I didn't say this, but in my opinion, when you get overwhelmed, you can always come back to order. What
Mm.
is the order in which life goes? So the way that I look at that is order starts with relationships. So first is you and your creator, whatever you call that to be. Where's that relationship? Do I need to put some time into that? Then it's me and me. So the
Okay.
relationship I have with myself. So moms, we can't do much for other people if we are neglecting ourselves. So then
Mhm.
it's me and me. Then it may be you and your significant other, your spouse, particularly if that's your parents, I mean your child's parent. That
Yep.
relationship, I stress that will be the most important thing you will ever teach your children. That
Mhm.
relationship that you have with their parent. Then it's you and your kids, then it's you and the rest of the world. So if you stay in order, sometimes it won't be so overwhelming because you can always do a little spot check and
Yeah.
say, okay, today feels overwhelming. Where do I need to start? Let me start with that first relationship and work myself all the way through five.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for being here, Crystal. And thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode where we help you conquer the chaos one day at a time.